government do to promote infrastructure as a viable asset class? The answer is simple, and that is that the government should continue what it is already doing. This is the first government in a long line that has actually identified infrastructure as a priority. And the introduction of PPPs, for example, is a very welcome development for investors. Why is that so? I mean, people think that PPPs are a fad thing, right? I've heard of PowerPoint presentations and all these things. Joking aside, it's actually a very powerful procurement methodology. It allows the procurement of infrastructure and services that otherwise would not be built because there's no private sector involvement. But more importantly, it's capability building. You will find that after, let's say, President Aquino's term, you will find that you will have within the implementing agencies, the grantors, you will have bureaucrats who are actually familiar with the process and very well educated and adept at identifying the risks, the role sharing, financing, and so many other issues that accompany an infrastructure project. It's not like in the past where you had a BOT, you gave it to the private sector, and that was it, right? And they come back to you with problems. It's a continuing process with both the public and private sector involved. So going forward in terms, again, of institutionalizing reforms, this is a very concrete way of doing so. You will have government officials who will actually argue with you and point out to you that your calculations are wrong. This is something that didn't happen before, and I can say this because I've been in infrastructure financing in the Philippines since the 80s. It is difficult right now. It will take time. We've been involved in PPPs in many countries around the world, and I can tell you that it didn't start easy in those countries as well. But once it gets going, you will see that it actually is a very powerful tool, and it also pushes reforms. So, you know, we hope that this will continue into the coming administrations.
Can I have one person comment about Batangas Port?
Yeah, thanks for raising the point about Batangas. I think it's a good illustration of the power of infrastructure. We recently invested 5 billion pesos in a new plant in Tanawan, in Batangas. And we did that, we chose that site for a number of reasons. One was to do with the road network. The other was to do with the first Philippine industrial park. And the third, and most importantly perhaps, was Batangas Port. And not only does Batangas Port serve that factory in terms of importation of raw materials, it also serves our other factory at Lipa. So again, it shows the power of infrastructure in terms of attracting investment. I think the challenge now is to get more people using that port. We've tried to be in the vanguard of that movement of encouraging people to use that very excellent integrated facility. And as I say, to take some pressure off Manila Port, which certainly does present challenges in terms of clearance of raw materials. If there's anybody out there who is also a fellow importer of raw materials, I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of this excellent facility.
Okay, Jim, something about the port.
Just on Batangas Port too. It's a continuing. Do you have another mic? It's a really continuing challenge for us, because actually the situation, I do laud Nestle that they're using Batangas. It's all well developed, but in a single-digit utilization. And it's actually a chicken and egg situation where shippers wouldn't go there unless the shipping lines are there. The shipping lines won't go there until the shippers are there. So the department has taken the initiative to sit down with the shippers and the shipping lines and to really make them meet and decide that we use Batangas. Because looking at Secretary Singson, he will really smile if we keep the cargo trucks away from Metro Manila. We are Tinkering on policy, we could be as light-handed as allowing market forces to come into play. We could tweak around with fees to move markets. We could be more aggressive by putting in a take-or-pay situation, because the backhaul of a ship would be the challenge. And we could be as interventionist as preventing all locators located in Batangas and Laguna from not entering Metro Manila. So these are the options of government. We're currently weighing it, and I think a few words from Nestle would to encourage people to use Batangas.
And final question from the very patient gentleman over there. Sir.
Hello, good morning. Last question for Michael Rodriguez. I like the idea of the infrastructure alliance between GSIS and Macquarie, but my question to you is, do you have plans of growing it, creating another one, or even securitizing the fund? And maybe an additional question is, do you have a project earmarked for it?
Well, in terms of growing it, yes, we'd like to see it grow, of course, from a business perspective. But more importantly, I guess, creating such funds, again, brings the world's focus to the Philippines, because it signals to other investors all over the world that, yes, this is a country where you can invest even in infrastructure. So, yeah, more than the business opportunity, it's actually a nation-building exercise. In terms of projects, well, of course, we have our fiduciary duties to our investors. So, as a fund that's professionally run, we, of course, have to go through the rigorous process of determining which assets are appropriate. So it's, again, it's not that easy because there are many variables at play, but we are seeing the flow improve. It's not just a matter of government projects coming on stream. It's also changing dynamics in the marketplace. Until a few months ago, as you know, the country's liquidity situation, at least amongst the domestic investors, was very healthy or very awash with cash. So it was difficult for third-party investors to come in. But that's changing somewhat. And we also are seeing reforms being introduced to allow other players to come in. For example, in bidding for PPPs, I understand the government's looking at allowing unincorporated joint ventures and possibly even funds. Well, we've been advocating for investment funds to come in and be recognized as bidders in their own right. It'll take time because, of course, there are legislative structures to be dealt with, but as more of these reforms are introduced, yeah, we will see a lot of deal flow and hopefully more follow-on funds, not just for us, but for everyone else.
Well, I'd like to thank our panelists for this second panel discussion. Thank you all for participating in this. So we always like to save the best for last. So to conclude this session, we're going to invite Budget Secretary Butch Abad for the closing remarks.
Colleagues in government, our partners in the private sector and business, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Philippine government and the economic management team, I wish to thank you all for participating in this Philippine economic briefing. Let me close this briefing by speaking about a subject that is not economic, but something that underlies our ability to set in place credible public institutions that are critical in promoting a stable, consistent, and predictable investment environment. For those of you who read the headlines today, clearly our country faces another critical crossroad in its difficult yet determined and increasingly successful struggle to instill the values of good governance and integrity in public service. The current turn of events has led to a disruptive situation that can put our nation to the brink or lead it to a much better place, depending on the path we choose to take in the face of an unprecedented outpouring of our people's rightful outrage. The people have spoken. Abolish the pork barrel and all that it symbolizes: greed, arbitrariness, and abuse of power. And hold those who have abused it accountable to our people. President Aquino has committed to fulfilling both. Yesterday, the government took two critical steps in this direction. First, the Department of Justice filed cases of plunder and malversation of public funds against not only Janet Napoles and her minions, but also against those who have broken their oath to our people. This is the start of a legal battle that can be protracted, but the administration will be unrelenting in its quest for justice on behalf of its people. Second, the House Committee on Appropriation has begun sponsorship of the General Appropriations Bill for 2014, with the pork barrel fund deleted from the budget. The 25.2 billion PDAF has been stricken out of the proposed budget for 2014 and realigned to regular programs of key social and economic service delivery departments, which have been given full discretion to utilize them for poverty reduction programs. Of course, this is just one step of the many towards the timely approval of the 2014 General Appropriations Act before this year ends. We must recognize that the people's outrage goes beyond pork barrel. Beneath their indignation is their deep desire for bold, meaningful, and sustainable change, to reform public institutions, to ensure that public funds are used to uplift people's lives, especially the poor, and to make public officials, as well as those who deal with them, act with conscience, compassion, and a strong sense of social justice. These are also the reasons why President Aquino was elected in 2010, to end the people's powerlessness over their government, over the economy, and even over their own individual and collective welfare. Unprecedented reforms in various arenas, especially in the management of public funds, have been going on since 2010. But with our people's renewed sense of collective outrage and militancy, this has had the effect of hastening and further deepening the reforms that we thought would come not at this time, but down the road. Our people are standing up to express their deep stake in their country and claiming their right to co-govern. This alone is a great opportunity that we must not waste. We in the Aquino administration believe that all these developments harnessed well present to us a great opportunity to raise Daang Matuwid to a higher plane. Guided by the Aquino social contract, we are leveraging all possibilities to induce more transparency, promote greater accountability, and establish wider mechanisms for citizens to own the reforms now transforming our society and to vigorously sustain them. The national budget is a primary arena of battle for the Daang Matuwid. President Aquino acknowledges the utmost importance of the budget in achieving his social contract. Thus, we are pursuing a budget reform agenda which seeks to ensure that government spends within its means, on the right priorities, and with measurable results. Our public expenditure management reform journey started as soon as President Aquino assumed office in 2010, when he directed the adoption of a zero-based budgeting approach to plug leakages and weed out inefficient and ineffective public spending. ZBB was our entry point into a new realm of budgeting, which supplants the old regime of discretion, abuse, and impunity, and which puts primacy to rebuilding and sustaining public trust. We have followed through on this first salvo by introducing critical budget reforms to ensure that we spend within our means on the right priorities and with measurable results. For instance, starting with the 2011 General Appropriations Act and with the support of Congress, we have introduced a new tradition of early enactment of the national budget. This alone, simple as it sounds, has prevented a significant amount of inefficiency and discretion caused by the frequent reenactment of the budget in the previous administration. Towards making public institutions truly driven by performance, we have transformed the face of our national budget through performance-informed budgeting, starting with the 2014 budget, currently being reviewed by Congress. Government agencies' committed performance targets and outcomes are clearly indicated in the budget so that the public can hold government agencies to account for their performance. To create wide and formal spaces for citizens down to the grassroots to participate in the budget process, we have introduced mechanisms such as bottom-up budgeting, where 20 billion in local poverty reduction projects crafted by the poorest 1,226 cities and municipalities with the participation of their citizens were included in the proposed 2014 budget. The Aquino administration is committed to see through it that the Philippine budget process has been significantly transformed by the time President Aquino steps down in 2016. Meanwhile, it is our fervent hope that the people's deepened stake in the budget process and in governance will find sustained and constructive expression. Our success depends not only on government's unwavering commitment, but more importantly, on our citizens' unfettered vigilance and active engagement. We believe that only through bold and meaningful governance can sustained and inclusive economic growth be attained. A regime of good governance is a key platform in underlaying the new prosperity that we want for our country. One built on fairness, driven by industry, and leaves no one behind. In particular, through good governance, we can truly enable the private sector to perform its rightful role as the engine of economic growth. We continue to set the stage for the private sector's growth through a fair, stable, and predictable policy, regulatory, fiscal, and political environment. We are committed to providing the private sector a stable macroeconomic and fiscal platform. Our commitment is proven by the investment grade rating that we finally achieved this year. We continue to pursue reforms to improve our country's competitiveness and ease of doing business. As was earlier stated, the recent Global Competitiveness Index speaks volumes about our commitment. From 2010, we have leapfrogged by 26 places to 59th. We acknowledge that we still have much work to do, but we are certainly in the right direction in further increasing competitiveness in order to make our country more attractive to investments. Moreover, we are committed to further increase investments in the needed public goods, especially in infrastructure, to connect the farthest margins of our country to opportunity. We will increase the rate of public infrastructure spending from 2.3% of GDP this year to 3% next year, 4% in 2015, and to the benchmark 5% by 2016. But aside from driving economic growth, the private sector performs another critical role in our society. The private sector has a deep stake in the state of governance, of social stability, and of the economy, which affect the viability of your enterprises. Because of this, I have always believed that the private sector is a powerful driver of reform. In fact, it has demonstrated this in various moments of our history. However, it can be a driver of reform if it chooses the straight path and not, quote-unquote, business as usual. As we in the government are leveraging the unique opportunity we now have to deepen and accelerate governance reforms, so should you in the private sector truly perform your crucial role as co-advocate for reform. You might ask, how can you intensify your stake? Let's take a simple step. On Thursday, the third Integrity Summit will be convened. Have your companies sign the Integrity Pledge. We acknowledge that so far, the Integrity Initiative has grown fast to 1,170 Integrity Pledge signatories in its first 3 years. That, however, is still a speck in the total corporate role. In our count, only 47 of the BIR's list of top 200 corporate taxpayers this year have signed the Integrity Pledge. With many of you desiring to take part in transformation, it should be easy to expand the initiative to at least 2,000 in the immediate. I think Ramon de Rosario and Henry Schumacher are here with the sign-up forms. Yeah. The private sector, by the way, is a key sector in the broader constituency for reform, composed also of civil society, the academe, communities, and other sectors. A strong constituency for reform is necessary for the success of our governance reform agenda. It can provide strong, widespread, and sustained political support and demand for reforms, such that the reversal of reforms in the future becomes politically and economically costly. In these extraordinary times, we have a momentous opportunity to effect real, game-changing, and irreversible change. We have a president truly committed to leaving a legacy of good governance and an empowered citizenry by the time he steps down in 2016. We have reformed constituencies who have become more assertive in claiming the right to co-govern this country. We have a nation which has found new hope, which has demonstrated its potential for prosperity, and which is now shining brightly in the world. Thank you, and good morning to all of you.
Thank you very much, Butch. Don't go to your seat, because I'd like to call the economic managers, Governor Tatanco, and private sector panelists to come up for a photo opportunity. And as they do that, I would like to thank all of you, our reactors, private sector panelists, and all of you from the private sector and the audience and the media for participating in today's economic briefing. I'd also like to acknowledge the BSP Investor Relations Office for organizing the activity with the assistance of their BSP colleagues at the Corporate Affairs Office, the counterparts in the economic agencies, DOF, DTI, DBM, NEDA, DPWH, DOT, DOE, DA, DOTC, PPP Center, the SEC, the BIR, and the BOC. Once again, if I can call the economic managers up for a photo opportunity, as well as the private sector panelists.
We'd like to thank Secretary Carandang for hosting our program this morning. And once again, we'd like to thank our economic managers, our cabinet secretaries, our distinguished guests from both the government and private sectors for joining us here this morning. Again, we'd like to request everyone, our guests, to come on stage for our photo op. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here. Heavy snacks are available for you, so we encourage you to partake of them.